everyone, this is Dr. Alex Avila with Lowy University, and we're here at the LA Times Book Festival at USC, and having a great time. A lot of good authors, a lot of good people. We have a very fascinating guest today, who is Richard Lowy, if I said it correctly, and our topic today is Tragedy to Triumph. Richard was an international event producer and creative director. He staged A-list summits and concerts for Van Morrison, Malcolm Gladwell, and 7 heads of state. But his most personal work is Kalman and Leopold, surviving Mengele'S Auschwitz. Drawing on interviews with his father, Leopold, and fellow survivor Kalman, he chronicles how 2 Hungarian Jewish boys endured Joseph Mengele's experiments, survived, and eventually came back to see each other 56 years later. It's a memoir that talks about all the stuff here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir.
So you got a tremendous story here. Now, you were doing big events, rock star and all this stuff, and then you started working with your dad's story. What was the change in your life?
Well, actually, it was around 2015. I had bypass surgery. And after the surgery, I decided, I had enough money. I'd done these world-class shows, and I thought, you know what? There's a lot of pressure. I want to kind of take it easy. And so I play music, and just life went on its merry way. COVID hit, and when COVID hit, everybody sequestered into their house. I found the 2 hard drives that I had collected the story of my father and Kalman. So we need to do a little backstory to get to this part of the story.
Yes.
So back in 2000, I made a documentary on my father called Leo's Journey, the story of the Mengele twins, which is narrated by Christopher Plummer. We got broadcast deal in Canada, parts of Europe, and Israel. When it showed in Israel, a man happened to be watching the film, and he saw a picture of my father as a young boy.
Wow.
He freaked out. He started pointing at the TV and goes, "It's my Lipa. It's my Lipa." He'd been searching for my father for 56 years because my father helped protect him inside the SS guard shack. One morning on June 21st of 1944, an SS officer is walking out front of Barrack 14. He picks 2 boys out of the line. They're not related. Both boys have their own twin sisters. Picks one boy, Kalman, walks farther down the line, picks another boy, Leopold. The 2 boys are taken outside the electrified gates into the SS guard shack, where they become the servant boys. They're forced to clean their holsters, fire up the coal stoves, polish their boots, serve them food. These are the SS guards of Mengele's hospital camp, right beside crematorium number 4 and the fire pit, right beside the gypsy camp. My father and Kalman witness everything that's happening. End of the war, January 1945, the boys are separated. Kalman goes to Israel, my father comes to Canada. I make the film in 2000 called Leo's Journey, the story of the Mengele twins, where it's broadcast in Israel, Tel Aviv. Kalman sees the film, and he freaks out, my Lipa.
Wow.
He's found the boy he's been searching for 56 years.
That's incredible. Let me bring it back a little bit.
Sure.
So Joseph Mengele was a diabolical doctor that did some experiments. Was the twin studies part of that?
The twin studies were part of that, but you call him a diabolical doctor. At that time, he was a doctor in the German medical world, and he wasn't the only one. And this was, and everybody thinks, oh, he's just this mad scientist character. No, he's part of what was going on in the institutionalized medicine in Germany at that time.
Right.
Okay.
So what was the twin part? What was he doing with the twins?
Well, what was happening was that there was Professor Ottmar von Verschuur, who was Mengele's mentor at the Frankfurt University. Ottmar von Verschuur was the one that was interested in the twin studies, not Mengele. Mengele was a student. Ottmar was the one that put him inside of Auschwitz, and Mengele was sending the information back to Ottmar. What they were looking for wasn't how to increase the population with twins. If they wanted to do that, they would have taken the mother and the father of the twins, right? What they were using them for was control subjects. So if you and I were twins, you're the test, I'm the control, they inject you with something, you die, they put you on the table, they open me up, and they compare our internal organs to see what happened. Then they dispose us and they go to the next set of twins. They didn't know that paternal twins were different than identical twins. Right? Okay. At that time, they didn't understand it fully. Right. They weren't trying to change the eye color. It was all of the differences that Mengele was interested in. Noma was a disease that they would inject them with. And so they were basically having research mice. And the twins were the perfect subjects for them to use.
Actually, now let's go into the actual story. Now, you said they were friends. They helped save each other's lives.
No, it wasn't that they were friends. Okay, what had happened was that my father wanted to be invisible. He felt that by being invisible, he would stand at the back of the line so he wouldn't draw attention to the guards.
Right.
That morning, where they were put together, my father's put with this other boy. This other boy's innocent. He's a religious boy. He doesn't know what's going on.
Right.
My father thinks this kid's going to draw attention to us. He's worried that this kid may get us hurt. Now they're working in the guard shack. So slowly, they started to become friends because my father had to now protect this kid and help protect himself by not being noticed. Over the time, they became more friendly to each other, and then they started feeding each other, saving the food from these German guards, sharing it.
So they bonded together.
Correct.
Through this horrible experience. The idea of having this deep friendship, which I assume they did, and what's called reciprocal altruism, and helping each other and being able to survive something beyond themselves. Like Frankl would talk about, the search for meaning. Did they find meaning, and what happened to them at some point?
Did they find meaning? I don't know that it was meaning per se, but it was interesting because Kalman would be looking at what was going on, and he was fearful for his life, as was my father Leopold. But my father always looked at it and he said, one more day, one more day, one more day. I just have to get through today, right? Where Kalman was letting what was going on around him happen to him, where he wasn't looking towards the future with the hope that my father had. And because of my father gave Kalman hope. My father looked up to, or Kalman looked up to my father, so he was the rock. He was the one that, always saw something coming. And the meaning was that they felt that they survived the horrificness of Auschwitz. And then after the war, my father, it was like, the idea was he will build a life for himself. And he put it behind him and he moved on. So he never really talked about the war after 1945 and survived. He gave a couple of testimonies here or there, but he built a life. He got married. He had a family. He built a clothing, menswear business. He was loved by the neighbors, by the customers that came in his store. Everybody thought he was the funniest guy, and he was very full of life. When he died on the Vancouver Sun, which was the provincial newspaper, the title was His Life of Horror and Humor. So he used humor to basically be this positive person in his life and help other people.
That's wonderful. Because, in psychology, we have terms like post-traumatic growth and humor as resilience. It sounds like some of these elements were
100%.
Were coming out.
100%.
Is there a humorous thing in the book that you can mention?
Sure. So inside the guard shack, there are these brutal guards. One of them is named Fritzy Fritz, and I can't make this stuff up. Okay. This guy, Fritzy Fritz, is a Bavarian giant with coal shovel hands, and he would beat the crap out of these kids. Right? If there was a speck on your shoe, if they looked at them the wrong way, they'd get the back of the hand and they get a kick. They get a boot across the thing. And these are boys, they're 14, 16 years old, and they're probably 50 pounds less than they should be. Okay? So they're coming back from the guard shack and into the barrack. So they get back into the barrack, and there's another character there. There's a dwarf, and his name is Leopold. Turns out the dwarf is Kalman's uncle.
Oh, wow.
Okay, and all this twist.
Okay.
And so now he's in the bunk with his uncle, and they're sharing little bits of piece of bread. And Leopold says to Kalman, he says, "You know what day it is today?" And Kalman says, "No." And the dwarf, he's been marking off on the side of the bunk like, in a prison, the days. He goes, "It's September 17th. It's Rosh Hashanah. It's New Year's. Good Yontif. Happy New Year." Kalman's going, "Happy New Year in Auschwitz?" Or, And anyways, the next morning, 5 o'clock, he meets my father outside of the barrack to walk to the guard shack. So Kalman's going, "Hey, you know what day it is today?" My father looks at him. He's like, "No." He says, "It's Rosh Hashanah. Good Yontif." My father looks at him and he says, "Hey, maybe Fritz will give us a day off. You ask him."
Fritz. Okay. I get it. So they're finding stuff. Yeah, I get it.
There's humor.
Humor, yeah.
Because people think that
Right.
it's just this. Yes, it's absolutely terrible, but people are living their lives now, and they're looking out for people that are less fortunate. And there's bad people too. There's people who are stealing the shoes off of other people, or stealing the bread rations under a pillow.
Right.
But there's also people that are giving their bread rations and helping other people. So it's an entire, world that's inside the barrack that a lot of people don't know the day-to-day life. And this book looks at that life as well.
Right, psychological components of that.
100%.
I was remember the movie Life is Beautiful. I remember that one where there's humor, but also there's very tragedy and at the end. So the idea of the psychological aspects of that's kind of interesting because I did some studies. I work with trauma victims. I have a forensic practice. And one of the things I talk about is the 7 stages of steel skull development. Steel skull meaning resilient. One of them being humor. Another one is meaning, but also optimism and gratitude are other ones. So I don't know, was there any of that in there at all? Optimism as in hope or gratitude as in gratitude?
You really need to learn more about Laosh, who is the little dwarf character.
Yes.
Because Laosh was this wise, he's like a Yoda. And in the book, you'll have a picture. He's an artist. He was Mengele'S artist and would draw portraits of Mengele. Okay? And he was the one that had the wisdom. He had the one, and he had the intelligence to be able to tell Kalman what to look out for, how to take care of him, and he was the wise individual who would give Kalman guidance. And my father was the streetwise kid. He was the one that if there was optimism, he was looking and saying, we're going to make it through today. I just have to make it through today, one day at a time.
Right.
Don't try to overthink it. You're not worried about next week. We're worried about the next half hour and how to stay alive for the next half hour. So there were a lot of different things happening. And when you're in a death camp that's murdering 7,000 people a day, and the bunkmate beside you is taken for an experiment, comes back with his head bandaged, and dies later that evening, it's really hard to have a lot of optimism in a situation like that. So it was very short little snippets of how do I survive this next half hour? How do I get through to this next day? In a way that is optimism. Dad's trying to stay invisible, right? And they did. They survived, and there were moments where it could have gone the other way.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of living in the now, that's talked about a lot in Eastern philosophies. But that's a real practical application, right? Because there isn't maybe not a tomorrow.
That's right.
But that's a very powerful, being in the present. And I was recalling that Viktor Frankl talked about that. He said he would play imaginary chess, or he would think of a book he wanted to write, or, there was something he was thinking about in the future. He was seeing his grandkids graduate from college.
Right.
These are the kind of things that help him survive, mentally. And he said that he saw some men that were very big and strong, but they faded very quickly and died. And some guys were small, like you said, skinny, but they had that mental fortitude, right? There was something about it that was different. Apparently your dad was one of those.
So, yes, and so Kalman, in the barrack, this older man who was the CEO of the coal industry within all of Hungary, which is an extremely powerful man, Jewish man. So because he was Jewish, he's now inside the same barrack.
Right.
Okay? And he says to Kalman, I will look out for you. I will take you on as my son. We need to do our education. We must keep our education going. You come and see me every day after work, and we will do a lesson.
Okay.
So he's going to school with this man who's teaching him, scholarly education about the Torah and the Talmud and the Bible, and every day they're having these lessons, because when we get out of here, we will have a life. You will be my son. Unfortunately, that man ended up on the heap. Kalman knew where he went. He was older, he was frail, he ended up dying. And then Kalman realized that, his hope started to fade. My dad's hope never faded, right? And so when you speak of, looking at tomorrow in the education like Viktor Frankl speaks about, it was happening in there. And I'm very honored because some of the reviews I've been getting, I just had somebody write that this story reminds them of Viktor Frankl. Another person said it's written like Tolstoy. And I went, wow.
Beautiful.
And the reason is that because I didn't write the book as much as I took their testimony and I put their testimony down as it was. Simple, straightforward, 14, 16-year-old boys telling you as it happened. And it's not embellished, it's not dramatized, it's not novelized. This is testimony, which makes it different than someone who's trying to, it was a dark, stormy night and the Nazis came in. There's none of that. It really is just
How
testimony.
did you get that? Did you tape record them, or how did you get all this stuff?
So I brought them together, I interviewed them, I have it on recording.
So 56 years later.
Video.
They met.
What's that?
56 years later.
56 years later, I reunited them.
So you brought them in, you flew them in or something? Or how did that
I
work?
brought them together and into Vancouver, and I got the video cameras, and I got a director, and I had the two of them. Their footage of their interviews are now archived in the U.S. Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. So if you watch the interview footage at Washington, D.C., you can see them, and then you can pick up the book and read the book, and it's the same verbiage in the book.
So how many hours was the videotape?
20 hours.
Wow.
Over 20
and
hours.
It sits there for that long? It seems like a long time.
That's a long time.
So they got tired? I mean, I'm sure they're older people at this time.
Well, I would do it over a period of time, right? And then after Dad passed away, I flew to Israel, to Tel Aviv, and I got another 5, 6, 7 hours of recording from Kalman. I'm sorry, 5, 6, 7 days from Kalman at his home. Right, and so I took all of that and then transcribed it all. And so what is interesting, it happens that you and I have our memories from growing up. So you'll tell me a story. We all have our favorite stories. You might tell me that story 5 or 6 times, right? And Dad would tell the same stories over and over again. There was the time they came and took me and took my blood. They took a transfusion from me into a German soldier. Hey, did I tell you about the time that they came and they took the blood? Oh, I remember there was this one time they came and took the blood. Okay, they kept telling the same story. Well, when he was with Kalman, he told the story, but we were talking about October 7th, 1944, when the Sonderkommando had an uprising and they blew up crematorium number 4. Okay, and the German soldiers came in and they fought the Sonderkommando and they killed all the Sonderkommando. Later that afternoon, a Red Cross truck showed up, picked up my father, and took him over to crematorium number 2. And on the bed over there was another German soldier, and that's where they did the blood transfusion. How did I find this out? From reading Dr. Mengele'S book about the Holocaust. Dr. Mengele'S was Mengele'S pathologist. So Kalman didn't tell me, and my dad didn't tell me, but in Mengele'S book, he talks about how a Jew was brought in and how they took the transfusion to save this German soldier's life. And so all these stories are related. And so I was able to figure all this out.
Very
and
powerful.
Dad then finally said, he says, I think it was on the time of the uprising.
What happened to Kalman after the war? Did he become successful? Or
Kalman went to work for the Israeli Air Force, and then he worked for LL, and he was responsible for taking delivery of the LL jets, ended up in Seattle, and would come to Vancouver for his vacations. He was in the same city that my dad was in. He didn't know it. Right. He only knew my dad as Lipa.
Small.
And so, but he did go to the Washington Museum. He went to Yad Vashem. He went to Germany. He searched for 56 years and couldn't find my father. And then simply by chance, he saw him.
Now, what role did faith play in these survival people? You may have heard of Rabbi Kushner. He wrote the book When Bad Things Happen to Good People. And there's a classic, the tale of Job. In the Bible, remember, the guy was righteous, and then Satan said, okay, he's righteous because you give him everything, but what if you take away stuff? So they start taking away his workers, his livestock, his family, and then eventually he had all these boils in his body, but he never gave up, trusting in God. Did any of your dad or this Kalman had any spiritual faith?
Well, Kalman was a religious boy.
Jewish faith?
Jewish religious. So Kalman was in a yeshiva, which is a school of learning. It's a Bible school. So before going into Auschwitz, Kalman was extremely religious. Father was more conservative. So father would be, go to synagogue on Friday nights, and on Saturdays his father would look forward to it, the big meal on Friday night, and the challah and the wine. And so.
But did they ever ask God why, or did they ever curse God?
So Kalman, after the war, became less religious and then non-religious. However, he went to university to study the Torah and the Talmud. He loved the study of the Scripture. He loved the stories of the Scripture, but he called God the chairman. And he always had questions for the chairman, and the chairman never answered him. And so he said that after the war, he was not religious. He gave up on religion as as a faith, but he still questioned God on what was going on. How could you let that happen?
Right.
And then I don't know if you've heard, there was Ricky Gervais and Jerry Seinfeld, and Ricky Gervais is telling Jerry Seinfeld this joke about Auschwitz, and then Jerry goes, "I don't get it," and then Ricky Gervais says, "You had to be there."
Oh, okay. Oh, I get that. Okay.
So the
it's
idea,
the dark humor is, right?
yeah. So the idea of faith is a lot of people lost faith. A lot of people were reciting
Maybe they gained faith.
the religion, and they went to faith.
Right. So it's different.
So
different parts,
it's they had faith in something.
It's very powerful. Yeah, I mean, something beyond yourself. That's what Frankl talked about. Search for meaning is
Right.
the whole title of the book. And people have different meanings, but that's important to pull you through, the difficult parts of life, the survival. Now, how about Mengele? What did you know about him or learn about him as a person?
Well, interestingly enough, I took.
Now, your shirt says something about Mengele, right? It says,
Sure, it's surviving Mengele's Auschwitz.
Okay, so
the difference is that people went to Auschwitz, and most people went to the gas chamber. They went into the slave labor camps.
Right.
I look at Auschwitz differently because you're now going through a psychological thriller of dealing with Mengele's Auschwitz. You think about you're in Mengele's Auschwitz, which is different from the other Auschwitz that everybody else has experienced, because now you're a part of a human experimentation program.
Okay. But what kind of person was he? Was he a psychopath? Was he, I don't know, something else? Who knows?
Well, I'll leave that for the history books to kind of, look at what he
Maybe
did.
their profile there, yeah.
But I can tell you that he was a gentle person while he was dealing with the children because he didn't want to scare them.
Oh.
He was so my father and Kalman were under Mengele's protection.
Oh.
They were on a work detail where the guards were beating the shit out of the different people that were there, and my father kept moving to the back.
Right.
And then when they came to beat him, he yelled out Mengele, and the guards stopped.
Oh.
He said, "Get out." So he
Really?
knew
Wow.
Mengele meant God.
Wow. That's very
Everybody was afraid of Mengele. Even the soldiers, the Germans, the other officers were afraid of him.
Right.
Okay?
Oh.
So when he had the children in front of him, he would give them chocolate. They called him uncle.
Really? Wow.
Okay? And then he would murder them.
Wow. So gentle and evil at the same time.
Absolutely.
So two-sided,
he was. Kalman would say he was impeccably dressed like a movie star. He had a long cigarette holder with a cigarette on the end. He would sit with his feet up on the desk, and he looked like an elegant gentleman. And he treated everybody, that when they were in the presence of Mengele, my father, and Kalman, he was very gentle. But my father knew that this was the man that sent his parents to the gas chambers, and now Mengele is inspecting him. And he's so close, he can smell his breath because he's in his face, looking at his eyes.
That's a classic villain in any James Bond movie. They're kind of like a nice exterior, but they're very evil inside, right? And very dangerous.
This guy was the epitome of evil. There was a story from one of the other survivors that there was two ladies on the ramp, and they were separating. One was going to the right, one was going to the left, and she said, "Oh, she's my sister. Can I stay with her, with your sister?" And Mengele looks and says, "Which one's your sister?" He says, "This one here, she's his sister." Pulls out his gun, shoots her in the head, says, "Just keep going." Okay? This is what you're dealing with. This guy is just psycho. Okay? Sociopath, psycho, and everyone knew that this was the guy, the angel of death.
Right. This is the guy that captured in Argentina, or is it a different one?
Brazil.
Oh, Brazil. Okay.
So he drowned.
Oh, he drowned. Okay.
So if you read David Marwell's book of Unmasking Mengele, it will give you, that was published in 2020, it will give you the details, the forensic details of how they followed him, how they captured him, who he was, the background.
Right.
Like that's the person that if you really want to know who Mengele is, that will give you that.
Going back to your father, Leopold and Kalman, so this story that you wrote, this is a real story, right? From their
This is their testimony.
So what is the power or importance of this for, I don't know, everyday people, in the business world? Can we draw lessons from
100%.
Tell me some of the lessons.
So to give you a feel for the lessons learned is that let's go back to 1933, 34, 35. Mengele's at university, and his professor is Professor Ottmar von Verschuur. He's the one that indoctrinated his students into the racist ideology of the Germans and the Nazis. He's the one that is obsessed with the twin studies. He's the one that's taking his students, and it's his opinions and his thoughts and his beliefs that they're learning. They're not learning critical thinking. So to be a doctor in Germany isn't to look after someone, it's to basically purify the German race, right? So the question becomes with our educators today is that we see these universities and we see what's going on. The kids aren't being taught critical thinking, right? They're being taught philosophies of what their teachers believe. And we have to be careful because we really need critical thinkers. If you want to know history, you have to study history. But we live in a TikTok generation where people are just seeing what's on their phone. They listen to a 2-minute thing or a 1-minute thing, and that's what they get their information from.
Right.
So as you go through...
Well, I was talking more about like psychological takeaways, like resilience. You talk about being a witness, protecting people. What are the lessons that we can learn, specifically, psychologically speaking, from your father and his friends' experiences?
The lessons you can learn, I believe, is that, you need to build a community around you. You need to have people, like Kalman believed that his community was his faith. It was his grandfather, it was his mother, it was the friends in the community that looked out for him, it was the people that fed him. So it was the community around you, even in the barrack. It was the community around you that took care of each other in times of strife and times when you're feeling down. You need to reach out and you need to talk to your friends and other people in the community. You'd be surprised, like just standing at the booth down here, how many people have approached me and then said, congratulations on what you're doing. What you're doing is so important. Thank you for telling your story. And I engage with these people who are saying, I've had trauma in our family, and for you telling your story and showing that there is hope after what these people went through and that they lived their lives and had children, that gives them hope. So I think that's the real lesson out of this is that, we may look at people differently and say, I don't know who these people are, but don't judge them. It was interesting. I had somebody walk up to the booth yesterday at another art show that I was at, and I was looking at that person, and I said, oh, she's probably not going to buy a book. She's just a looky-loo, okay? And then she was more and more interested, and I started talking to her. She bought the first book. Okay. I judged her by just looking at her, saying she's probably not interested. She just doesn't look that tight. Right. And I learned a lesson again.
That's a good point. Yeah,
I prejudged her.
Yeah.
Today I had a guy come up to me, and he had a little thing that had the Palestinian flag and the Israeli flag. And he started asking me about what's your take, what's the thing.
Right.
And my take on that is that I feel for the Palestinian people. And I look at it and I say, did you hear about the Palestinian protest? Have you heard about the Palestinian protest? Not the pro-Palestinian, but the Palestinian. There was a group of Palestinians in Gaza that rose up against the Hamas. They do not want the Hamas leadership. What Hamas did was they found the leader of that movement and they killed him. They killed one of their own. So the point I'm making is this gentleman then gave me his pen and he said, thank you. He came up with a whole attitude that he was going to take me down, and it ended up we had a nice conversation.
Right, so you joined him and then reversed the energy in a positive way.
Absolutely.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you, Richard. It's been a wonderful having you on the show. This is a tremendously powerful story. You're inspiring a lot of people. Hope and community connected is, I think, what you're talking about. And as long as you have community, there's hope. As long as you have hope, you can have community.
If you'd like to learn more, you can go to kalmanandleopold.com, KALMAN, AND, Leopold.com.
Perfect.
And you can also watch the video of Leo's journey, and you can buy the book there.
Right. I know you're a great marketer, which is good. But you're retired, right? We still got the good. All right, it's been a pleasure having you here.
Thank you so much for telling the story.
So again, Dr. Avila here. So the message is hope, community, and survival, right? And also transforming triumph from tragedy. And again, thank you very much to be on the show. Again, Dr. Avila, this is Lowy University. It's time now. Put away your notebooks, your iPads, your phones. Class is now dismissed.